How do you build a high-performing culture? This is Culture Architects. Candid conversations with extraordinary leaders sharing their biggest successes, failures, and lessons learned on their culture journeys. Here's David J. Friedman.
Welcome to today's episode of Culture Architects. Today we have a great guest, Geneviève Retzlaff. Geneviève has an interesting background. She's a transformational career coach and founder of a company called Grow Better Together. What's interesting, particularly interesting about Geneviève and her background is that she started at Cirque du Soleil. How many of us have seen great Cirque du Soleil shows? Well, she started at the company Cirque du Soleil Entertainment Group, which is the largest contemporary circus producer in the entire world. And she spent a decade there in HR and traveled to and worked in more than 40 countries, which is pretty incredible. She transitioned to coaching and then founded her own coaching firm, which today is headquartered in Vancouver, Canada. At Grow Better Together, they're all about helping organizations to embrace what we might call a more human-centric approach. And they help to create cultures that employees can really connect with. I'm really excited to hear her story, and I know that you'll, as listeners, enjoy this story. And so, Geneviève, welcome to Culture Architects.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's our pleasure. So let's just, for our listeners, get some context, a little bit of background. So how did you get started in the HR world, and how did you get your first job at Cirque du Soleil? That must be an interesting story. Start there.
I was one of those students in college where I was like, I don't know what to do. I was trying so many programs until I got into HR where I felt really connected and it was just easy. I was in the flow and was like, I want to create change for the better for people to connect with what they do and the organization. And that's how I got my studies in HR. I was just really passionate about people, and also feels like now in hindsight, I don't think that's a good advice to give to people. Like if you enjoy working for people, go in HR. Like I wouldn't give that, advice anymore, but that was given to me. And so that's what I end up. And the Cirque du Soleil was really out of university, just literally got my degree, went on a trip with a girlfriend to Peru. And while I was there, I saw this position open at Cirque du Soleil. And it was back in the days where it was internet cafe style, So I just randomly saw that as I was in Peru and applied, just sent my CV because it was all prepared. You finish university, you have a CV ready. And as I came back, first day back, I got an interview scheduled to go to Cirque. And that was as an HR coordinator, just very entry level, but it was almost serendipitous, like it's almost like I manifested it, and I really had the intention to work at Cirque du Soleil. It was one of my goals, and so only position I applied, and then that's how it got started.
Now you were telling me before you come from Munich, is that right? So is that where you did your studies in Germany, or where did you study?
Oh, I come from Montreal.
Oh, that's from Montreal. Then you were in Munich before, but you were in Montreal.
Correct.
Got it. Okay,
yeah.
So you were in Montreal, and that's where you did your studies, which is a little unusual to be as an undergraduate studying HR. But so you then go to Cirque du Soleil. So where is Cirque du Soleil headquartered? Is that in Montreal? Oh, it is. Okay. And so, and how big an organization? I mean, I see them everywhere, but in terms of numbers of people, how big an organization is that?
Well, I have left Cirque about 10 years ago now, but back then it was about 8,000 employees worldwide. And so it was, pretty big. And the structure was very interesting, and I had to, learn out of that, which was very interesting. So there's the touring shows, there's the resident shows, there's also the headquarters in Montreal that had thousands of employees just in this building. So it was divided this way, whereas now I think it's a bit differently divided, but the idea is the same.
Got it. And so when you're in your first role in HR as somewhat of a generalist, like what are you doing in that role?
Yeah, I was supporting the tours, with I was the first contact to employees and artists, technical crew, and all of that had just general HR questions, and then I could escalate. It wasn't at my level at that point to take care of the touchy cases, but just to escalate them, and then I kind of grew from there. And when I was working from Montreal with people on tour. I was like, I want to be there too. And so that's what happened. I just had that goal, and then I went for it. And then I told everyone in the organization that was part of my goal, and then they kind of supported me through that transition.
Nice.
And that's when my touring journey started. And that felt more like, now I'm in the world of entertainment. Like now I get to visit all these countries in kind of a rock style.
Wow. So as you were doing all this touring, so if I'm understanding right, Cirque du Soleil is performing in a certain country or a certain city, and are you then traveling with them and responsible for HR issues that come up with that touring group? Is that how that worked?
Yeah, so there's shows around the world, and so there's, at that point, I think there were 7 or 8 shows. So I was dedicated to one specific one, and I was the HR on tour then, and I was supporting the tour management office, getting visas for people, and organizing and transferring from one city to another with, like, I think there was something like 24 different nationalities, and so there's a good mix of cultures in there for sure. Like, it built up my tolerance for differences, and it just like it was such an enriching experience. And obviously, traveling around the world was the cherry on top.
I'll bet. And so somewhere in there, you're going through this HR career, and you start to get interested more in leadership. So what caused you to get more into leadership, and what did you learn there?
Yeah. It stemmed from a dissatisfaction, like a personal conviction that things could be done differently. That was creating some sort of a stronger connection. And I, as I said, like, I got into HR because I was, I wanted to make a difference in the organizational world. And when you get there, and that was like post touring, so my show was closing. So I came to a crossroads, going like, well, you can go on this other show, or you can try normal life again and go back to the headquarters and settle in Montreal, which is what I chose to do.
Okay.
And then I got into more of a HR business partner role. And that's how I got involved with leadership. And that's when you have like the weekly meetings with leaders that you're responsible for. You have this division. And at that point, I was taking care of the productions and some of the touring shows. So production is more like when a new show is being created, it's called a production. And the touring show is one is already, touring. But yeah. And so that got me thinking, so the leaders came with questions that I felt were just so basic about, like, how do I deal with these, tricky situations, like employee-related challenges, and I was like, well, have you tried that? Or have you tried that perspective? Or how about you put yourself in that person's shoes? How would you respond differently? And then I was like, oh, like, this is fun. Like, I really like these conversations. And then so that was definitely the trigger that got me interested into leadership, for sure.
Got it. And so you left Cirque du Soleil. Is that when you created your own firm, or was there something in between there?
No, there was something in between. Then I went into the world of film, and I was a head of HR for a visual effects studio that was just being created. So there was a startup, was a satellite office from a Californian studio that already existed. And then I really built it from the ground. Wow. And then in between all of that, I met my German husband in Montreal at the Oktoberfest of Montreal, funny enough. And then we moved to Munich together. And honestly, David, I think that was like part of a lot of people create change in their lives when there's some sort of a crisis, right? So for me, it was the way I was working. Like, this moving abroad allowed me to take that step back and to question, like, where am I going? Why did I get into HR? Is this the place for me? Is this what I want to keep doing? And internally, like, I traveled the world. So I thought, I'm moving to Germany. It's no big deal. But it was so different, like traveling with a circus versus living in a place where you don't know nobody, you don't speak the language. Like, I had an internal storm, and then when you have this overwhelm, all you want to do is get rid of that feeling and find solutions for yourself, right? Like, okay, how do I create change? How do I create this balance again, right? And that was this moment where I started to create Grow Better Together, going like, there must be a better way to work, and everyone around me is overwhelmed. They work way too hard. They're hitting the wall. How can I find solutions? And that got me into leadership coaching and all that transformational aspect.
Mm-hmm. And so you created Grow Better Together and started this. And I noticed on your website that it sounds like you focus largely, maybe not exclusively, but largely in the arts and entertainment world. And so what do you think in your experience is different about that world than the rest of the world, the non-entertainment world?
Yeah, so maybe first of all, there's something familiar, right? Because of my background, like I've mainly worked in roles, so I feel very connected and knowledgeable into their challenges. But also what I found, so I work with different industries. I work with many different industries, but I somewhat always go back to that, because what I really like to do is help people that are passionate, and people in the entertainment world, like they're so dedicated, and they really come from the best intentions, and they have a different understanding, right? There's this creative side with the pragmatic side. Like they're both inside these organizations, because you have those who organize and you have those who create, and they come together, and they all want to have this amazing experience for their guests, for their fans, for people. They want to create that once in a lifetime wow effect kind of thing, and it's just really beautiful to see. And I think creating change in that kind of setting is first of all it's very fun and it's exciting, and I want to be part of that with them. But it's so much easier. It feels like it's easier because you work with people that are dedicated so much. Then it's like the whole thing about having people more engaged in the work they do and all of this is not necessary. They already want the best for their project and the organizational goals. It's very aligned.
So, I mean, say what I'm thinking I'm understanding you to say. Tell me if I'm hearing this right. That it sounds like from your perspective and experience that those who are in the entertainment world, the subject matter itself is they're so passionate about that subject that you don't have to worry about them being engaged. Whereas if they were a manufacturing company, not to dismiss manufacturing companies, but the employees may not be as engaged and excited about being on a plant floor as someone in the entertainment world might be about their subject matter. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's a fair assessment.
And so we've got a workforce that is perhaps more already engaged, but we still need to get them to create the kind of culture that we want.
Yeah. You say that, but then it makes me reflect again on that statement, because, for example, I did a consult in December with a company that is providing security staff to large events. So it's still related to events. But when I asked him, like, why do you do that? You know, what's your calling? And he said, well, we live in Canada. There's a lot of immigrants. There's a lot of immigration. And then these people come. There's a lot of refugees, right? We welcome a lot of those over the years. And then this workforce is very, willing to work. And then he said, like, his purpose. So we're talking about a security staff. It's not super sexy, right? It's security.
Yeah. He's not doing entertainment. He's just a security guy.
He's not an acrobat, right? So he's providing security staff. But then his calling was to provide dignity, a decent salary, opportunities for their families, and all of this. So it felt like very purpose-driven, very heart-centered. And then I of course, like, then it's really connected to what I believe in too. So it's not like if you don't do anything sexy like entertainment or sports or like but it feels like maybe it's more, I would rephrase that now that you put it like that. It made me reflect, maybe more like very heart-centered, purpose-driven. And I find that the arts and entertainment and sports have that in common. Doesn't mean other industries don't, but that's what I found connected best with me.
Got it. And so as you work with these companies and you help them to build the kind of cultures that will help them to be as successful as possible, one of the things that I hear often is I'll hear many clients ask me, so what's the return on investment in this? Like, how do we know if the work we're doing on our culture is having the kind of impact that we would hope it have? How do you answer that when you're dealing with people in the arts and entertainment world?
Well, the work we do, maybe I just go back for a second to just explain how we do things. Great. To answer your question. So we have these two fronts. So we do organizational design, which is how are you structured, and is your structure serving your organizational goals? Okay. And the other piece is leadership development. Like, how can you become an authentic leader? And this together, when we interview people, when we understand the starting point, this is when we can see where the inefficiencies are, where things could be better structured. And then often as we do that, then we understand where the leadership pain points are. Okay. And so by, going with these two fronts, I can say that the return on investment is like, if you kill the inefficiencies and if you kill like what's holding the organizational goals from being achieved, that's your return on investment, because like often we come in when there's a discrepancy or people will achieve their goals, but at the expense of their well-being, people are burnt out and all of this. And then you kind of want it all, right? You want to achieve these goals in the most healthiest way. Right. And so the return on investment, you see it with people engaged. When people are happy, the clients see that, the clients return. If the clients return, then that's your return on investment. And then they refer you to other people. So it has this ripple effect that is hard to quantify, as me, right? Like, what's the ROI of coaching? Right. It's hard to give a number, but it's the ripple effect that creates eventually some sort of a snowball effect in the most positive way.
Can you give an example of maybe a company that you've worked with, and you don't have to tell me the name if that's anything confidential, but maybe somebody you've worked with, and let's separate these between the organizational design and the leadership coaching part. On the organizational design part, where maybe you went into some place and as you got to understand them, they were not structured in a way that was as helpful as possible, and you helped them to see a different way to structure, just to help our audience understand, practically speaking, like what would that look like?
Right. Yeah, I can give you an example. Actually, we just finished the case study, so it's very fresh in my mind.
Great.
The BC Place is a stadium that's welcoming the FIFA in 2026. It's kind of a big deal, right? So if you're a stadium, and then they struggled after COVID, the world of events just boomed. There was such a high demand for in-person events. And the stadium was changing its culture as the new general manager joined as well. And so all of a sudden, there was all these events needed to be booked. And then the team grew from, they were 3 to 15 within a very short amount of time. And as I said, dedicated crew, right? Everybody pitched in. Oh, like they all wanted the best experience for their fans and the guests. And so that created blurred roles and responsibilities. And then like over time, then that affects team dynamics, and that affects like how people interact with one another. Is this my job? Is it your job? Well, no, it should be my role, but why are you telling me what to do? This, you know what I mean? So we got into these dynamics.
And interestingly, it sounds like it came from the best of intentions, a willingness, a desire to be helpful, and yet it creates confusion.
Exactly. And so because it's a very dedicated team, they all were super on board with this project. They said, that's true. The way we work is it's almost like we're creating our own problems by just digging in like that. And wanting to get ready for the FIFA, it added like this huge amount of stress, right? And then the director was often saying, like, I need to strategize off the side of my desk, so you can't really do that with this size of an event. So what we did is we looked at, so the way we looked at where are we going? What is the destination? And then we look at the starting point. What are the what are the challenges? What are we trying to achieve? But where are we in terms of what are the real problems? And then we design a roadmap to get there. And that roadmap looked a little bit like we wanted to elevate the director so she could strategize properly to welcome FIFA and all of this. And but everybody was going to her directly because she kind of created that. And also sometimes you just, again, for the sake of the event, then you have boundary problems and you don't want, if you tell, a person that you can't help them for the sake of your well-being, then it affects the delivery. So anyway, so we elevated her. We added some layers of leadership to support her being the first contact. And then that trickled down into the roles and responsibilities. We created a new matrix, like a RACI matrix, like who's responsible of what, so that delineated a little better. But it came from what are the goals, what are the competencies that we need to achieve these goals, what roles could we have, disregarding what we have right now, but what roles could we have that could serve those competencies and those goals. And then the last portion is looking at who do we have. And then we had them do a Gallup Strength Finder, understanding where are their strengths, what is the intersection of their expertise, the things that give them energy, where they really do their best work, and their natural strengths. And then once we know the intersection and we know what the organization needs, then we just put them in that position. And so the energy level went up all of a sudden, and then that was the extent of the work. And then we work on the leadership, creating boundaries, more self-awareness, like all of these good stuff.
So it sounds like, through that organizational design work, you're able to put people in positions that play to their strengths better, and at the same time fill the gaps of what the organization needed for people.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's an example of the work we did. We don't always take this approach. It just depends on the client specifically, what they're struggling with. But to answer that struggle, then we came up with this roadmap.
And what would be an example of, let's say, a leadership coaching situation where an organization was struggling there, and what is it that you and your company do to help somebody like that?
So we have this program that we call the Authentic Leadership Revolution.
Okay.
So, like me, David, right? Like there's never been so many generations working at the same time. Right. And there's a bit of a clash, right? And there's all these struggle that we see that are forthcoming in like AI. What does that mean? AI is a great tool, but people are insecure. What does that mean in terms of my role? Is my role going to be abolished, or am I making myself redundant by using this AI thing? So there's a big need to kind of go back to basics and be more connected and unified. And so that's why, this program, what we do is we follow a very specific sequence. We do self-leadership, leadership of others, and then leadership, leading at scale. So bringing your organization forward. So we believe that sequence has makes a big difference, because once you're aware of what's going on in your internal world, it's easier to support your team. And then when you are able to support your team and elevate them, then you can co-create together to bring the organization forward.
Folks, that brings us to the end of the first part of my conversation with Geneviève Retzlaff, transformational career coach and founder of Grow Better Together. When we resume in the next episode, Geneviève helps to define some of the buzzwords around the work that she does at Grow Better Together, and we learn more about the authentic leadership revolution that she and her company are helping to cultivate. Make sure to stay tuned for that.
This has been Culture Architects with David J. Friedman. Join us next time for more insights and wisdom from great leaders in all walks of life. To book David for your next event, or to learn more about his writing, speaking, or consulting, go to davidjfriedman.com. Culture Architects with David J. Friedman is a production of CultureWise.